Hello, everyone, and a warm welcome to Dive In 2021. I'm delighted to welcome you to our session today, The Business of Belonging. Dive In is a result of collaboration, tremendous collaboration across the entire insurance industry. And we are very grateful to the 22 global festival partners you just saw highlighted in the video. And we'd also like to say a special thank you to our local co sponsored here shown for their financial, organizational, and heartfelt volunteer support creating and running these events. The success of Dive In is very personal. It comes down to the hundreds, and I may say thousands of volunteers who find time to organize these events while tending to their day jobs, their family obligations. We'd like to extend a huge thank you to each and every one of you for your tireless dedication, and I say a warm congratulations for creating a festival that is full of informative, inspiring discussions and insights. Personally, what drew me most to this session is the action, the energy, the fresh approach that you're going to hear and see today. Belonging is our topic, and we look forward to enlightening you and inspiring you on the journey. We will have a great panel with a fantastic moderator, and then we will have a video session of an inspiring founder of the Justice Choir. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the mic to our very esteemed, dynamic, and powerful moderator, Michelle Silverthorne, CEO of Inclusion Nation, and you can see that right there. And she believes that diversity and inclusion needs a new voice for a new generation. She is a recognized expert in organizational inclusion, and she's worked with Fortune 500 companies, tech startups, nonprofits, universities, enormous companies globally from every industry. From 1,000-person conferences to 20-person workshops, she's ready to equip us all journey of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Michelle's a graduate of Princeton University and the University of Michigan Law School. She practiced for two large firms in New York and Chicago, and then transitioned into the education field, where she's trained thousands of leaders. She's been featured on NPR, PBS, and in several publications, including the Chicago Tribune and Fortune magazine. She's a TED speaker. She's the author of a best-selling book. She's a global volunteer, and she's our moderator today. So a very warm dive-in welcome to you, Michelle. Please take it away.
Thank you so much. That was such a kind introduction. I went to Michigan. I live in Michigan, and so that bio picture that you see of me is maize and blue, as is my background. And I feel like my Princeton roots are not getting the same kind of love, so I'll have to work on that. I am Michelle Silverthorne. I am just so happy to be here. What we are going to do for the next hour and 20 minutes or so is we are going to learn a shared language. You see, we are at the summit because of the range of racial and ethnic and gender and religious and cultural differences that we have across this globe, all of the countries and nations that you are representing. But the reality is, when it comes to our companies, when it comes to our universities, when it comes to the people who go into the spaces who are wanting to be leaders, and especially when it comes to race, this has been a year and a half of a racial reckoning across this world. Our companies' demographics and our companies' leaderships don't reflect that reality. But that's not the end of it. Because here's the thing, you can bring as many marginalized folks, the global majority, you can bring them into your organization, but if they don't feel like they're part of the culture, they will not stay. Diversity does not exist without inclusion. And inclusion is where our values matter and where our differences are allowed to matter, where we can use our differences to change the way work has always been done. But the only way we get there is through equity. That's why it's a three-part system. And equity is hard. Equity is telling you that there are people in your companies, in your communities, in your countries that have been traditionally underserved, they are underrepresented, and they are marginalized. And we have to address why that is. And equity is telling us that it is not enough to just tell people you should encourage them to change their behaviors. Y'all, it takes a lifetime for people to change their minds about just one thing. What equity is telling you that we have to look at the barriers that exist and ask who put them there, who benefits from them, and why has no one changed them. And when we talk about change, and I talk about change and I work on change, that is my life. We got to talk about individuals and behavioral shifts, and we got to talk about systemic transformation, because you got to have both if we are going to achieve inclusion and belonging. And that is what we are going to talk about today. I am so happy that there's all 1,000 of you all across this world who have joined us, because we are going to have a really dynamic panel, a really engaging panel, a really exciting panel, and we are really going to dive into the uncomfortable questions, the hard questions, the questions that honestly some of us don't have perfect answers for. Whenever I do my programs on microaggressions, I'm really, really, really cognizant of all of the microaggressions examples I list are ones that I have said, because no one is perfect and we are all still navigating this together. So let me introduce to our panel, who are amazing, and I've had a chance to get to know them over the past few weeks. First up is Dean Anthony Nelson. Dr. Nelson is the Dean of the School of Business at North Carolina Central University. And he was previously at Grambling State and Bowie State. And during his administrative career, he has worked with faculty and companies and government agencies. And he has worked to develop a whole bunch of different degree programs and co-curricular programs that really set students on a path of success in their careers and in their graduate schools. If y'all don't know, the schools that I mentioned are historically Black colleges and universities here in the States. And that is very important because we're talking about the work of pipeline, the work of talent development. And in 2020, during the height of our pandemic, Dr. Nelson was appointed to the Durham Workforce Development Board and Durham's Recovery and Renewal Task Force. And he has also served as the president of the HBCU Businesses Dean's Roundtable. He has his degrees from North Carolina A&T State and from Pittsburgh and from Dallas Theological Seminary. Thank you so much, Dr. Nelson, for joining us. We also have Ronald Reeves. Mr. Reeves is having a little bit of internet challenges, so he may be in and out, but he is here. He is the Chief Diversity Officer for AIG, and he has been there for 22 years. And previous to that, he was the head of diversity and inclusion for the US, Canada, Latin America, and the Caribbean, which is where I'm from. I'm from Jamaica and Trinidad. He is responsible for partnering with AIG's leaders, managers, and employees to design, develop, and implement a sustainable and measurable, that's really important, DEI strategy that focuses on talent, workplace, and the marketplace. And I love Ronald's bio. He's a trainer, he's a facilitator, he's a coach. He was also a sales agent. He won a ton of awards at State Farm. He was a manager. He got his degree from San Jose State, and he lives in LA. And finally, I'm together now, we have David Chang. David is the Senior Managing Director, Partner, and the Commodities Portfolio Manager at Wellington, where he manages long only and long short commodity approaches. He is, and I'm going to pretend I know exactly what that means, David. He is also the Vice Chair of the Wellington Management Foundation Board. He is the sponsor, and we'll talk about sponsoring, to the Professionals Business Network. He is a member of Wellington's Upstanders Group. And one of the things that I love about David is that he was just recently named Male Ally of the Year. And from our conversations and his focus on action more than just intentions, I can certainly say I understand why he was recognized for it. David and I also have a connection. He was office hallway mates with my college roommate, which we just discovered today. And I have a lot of good memories of his company and how kind they were for many years to my roommate and when she was working there. And I got to tell y'all, good humans, you remember good humans, and you remember because good humans matter. So with that, welcome to our panel. I am so excited to have you here to talk to you, and we are just gonna dive right in. Clever. So maybe we'll start with, I wanna hear about your journeys a bit. A lot of people here are starting their journeys of doing the work of equity, or maybe they've been doing it for a while and they may feel a little bit stalled. It's been a really hard year for a lot of us. So if you could share with me your journeys, in our quest to create a more diverse and equitable and inclusive culture, what do you wish you would have known or understood earlier that you think would be valuable to the people who are listening here? And maybe we will start with you, Dean. You want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Michelle, and it's great to be here. My journey started at the University of Pittsburgh, and I graduated from there and started working for National Steel. And National Steel at that time had a very steel mill mentality, and it was very rough, union oriented, and they sent me from the Ivory Tower of Pittsburgh to go to um, where they had tons and tons of steel mills, and boy, it was a shock. It was a culture shock to me. I experienced a lot there, a lot of good things and some bad things. But I think that what I would have done differently, or what I wish I would have done differently, is I think I would have opened up and shared some of the things that were going on with other people more. I just kind of internalized them and didn't share with my colleagues. I didn't share with human resources. I just said, okay, well, I'll fight this thing myself, and I didn't have the language to fight it with. I didn't understand it. All in all, I think that I would have opened up and I would have shared what was going on at that time in that environment.
One of the things we talk a lot about, and this is something I know that you do with your leadership work, is the importance of building trust. And I was thinking, people ask me, like, what was the number one question I received the last year, after all this work? And I assume the number one is, how do I talk to my kids about race? But the second one was all about, how can I reach out to my Black colleagues now? And I always tell people, if you don't have that trust, then it's going to be hard for people to come to you and say, okay, here's what I'm struggling with, or here's what I'm going through. And as a leader, building that trust and building that sense, so you're not just waiting for a crisis for someone to do exactly what you just said, Dean, which is share with you what you're struggling with and share with you what you need from them. So I think that that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Okay, well, so my journey started very early, as in at the very beginning of my life. I was born to a single mother who is Chinese, worked in the investment banking, investment management industry throughout her career, and was able to appreciate very early on some of the challenges that she had to encounter as a single mother or as a caretaker, and also as a woman in the finance industry, which continues to be dominated by men. And that gave me a really strong appreciation for the role that we can play as allies. And so maybe one of the things I wish I had realized earlier in my career at Wellington is the role that I can play in, without necessarily having a broad and established top-down initiative, that we can form a grassroots initiative to really support our diverse colleagues. So that's certainly one thing I wish I had realized earlier on. And it led to creating this group that you mentioned earlier, Michelle, called Upstanders. And then the second thing I had to realize, and this was completely a mistake on my part, my natural assumption doing some work on diversity, equity, and inclusion is that it starts with recruiting. And it took me just a small number of conversations to hear from colleagues directly, well, what about me? And so actually it sort of completely reversed the focus from, when we think about the pipeline, from recruiting to really focusing on our existing employees and supporting them the best that we can. So maybe we can dive a little bit.
David, I could talk about that all day. I mean, it's right. And I remember being in a session once, and one of the C-suite leaders was saying, Michelle, there's no talent. I mean, we can't do the work because we can't find the talent. They're not graduating from the schools. And I'm like, yeah, the talent's right here in your own companies. And it's easier, I think, a lot of us to focus on that recruiting, and it's a lot harder to focus on that retention. And honestly, when we talk about belonging, that's the second piece that if we don't have that, then we're not going to stay. I want to go back to that pipeline question because I think it is a really, really good one. We have so many schools that are graduating so much, really high quality talent right now. But the challenge I often hear is that it's the pipeline. The pipeline's broken. I can name a high profile leader who said something very similar recently. So, Dr. Nelson, from your perspective, with the work that you have done in academia, how do you think schools right now are changing to address that, that diverse talent, the lack of qualified graduates who are graduating from the schools? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Oh, wow. I could really talk all day about preparing a talent pipeline, especially in the HBCU environment, this historically Black college and university environment. We are being bombarded with companies that are really looking for diverse talent in order to diversify the industry or their company. And in order to really diversify the industry or certain companies, you really have to increase the talent, the number of individuals that are there in the pool. So you have to turn that pool into more of a lake. So you have to bring people in. So it doesn't start with the universities, it starts with the high schools to bring more students and more prospective employees into that talent pool. And then there's the preparation part. We believe definitely that preparation and opportunity are the keys to success. So what we have done and what many universities are doing, especially schools of business, is they're developing strategic partnerships. Many corporations have done that for years, but on the flip side, what we are doing is developing strategic partnerships with corporations to help prepare our students professionally and then provide them with the opportunities to diversify certain corporations. We've developed partnerships with Cisco, with Dell. We're developing a partnership right now as we speak with the real estate industry. And, we don't have the infrastructure to entertain every single industry, every single corporation or association with the right amount of attention that each may deserve. So what we have done is we've developed these strategic partners to engage our students within and outside of the classroom. When you look at the university, it's sort of like a restaurant. You've got the kitchen, and then you have the restaurant or the dining area. And we've asked our employers to come back into the kitchen and help us prepare the meals. So to engage our students, to take them through certain activities, to talk with them about D&I issues, microaggression workshops, the imposter syndrome. But we want to make sure that our employers are working alongside of us and helping to prepare the students. We even have an executive in residence who can help with professional development, with coaching and mentoring sessions. And then finally, we just want to challenge the prospective employers. We want to let them know that, all right, look, you've got to be authentic and truthful with our students, and you really have to make sure that it's a great place to work for our students. So, yeah, I'll stop there. But thanks for the question. I really appreciate that. We're doing a lot.
I remember when so I went to two schools that I loved both of my schools. I thought they were fantastic. They were also both predominantly white institutions. That's what we call them if they are, predominantly white. And I remember talking to someone who had gone to an HBCU law school and her experience of just how much training is given to Black and brown students on how to succeed in the workplace, how to handle bias, how to deal with microaggressions. That was not even a conversation when I was in school. And I think now, because of the proliferation of first generation students, because of the increase in awareness of equity, that has become a greater part of the conversation. But you're absolutely right. Giving, it's really giving the tools to reinforce that, yes, you are going to go into those spaces. You will face that imposter syndrome. You might feel like you're a fraud. You may not have had any family, like David was saying. You may feel like, the families that you come from, you may not understand that you may not feel like you belong in these spaces, but you do, and here are the tools to help you succeed. And that is when we talk about inclusion. Now, David, I'll go back to you here. I think that's what we're talking, right? How do we create that sense of belonging? How do we create that sense of, yes, you do belong here. Yes, this is your space. And as you think about what you have been doing, David, in your organization, what do you think? What are some tools? I mean, everyone always wants the tools, right? As you think about Wellington, what are the tools that you've been putting into place to really build that sense of inclusion and belonging?
The tools, in my opinion, that have been the most effective are those that move furthest away from sort of training, to be perfectly frank. I think the most helpful is when we can hear directly from our colleagues and establish relationships where we're educating ourselves, not just in 2-hour or 4-hour sessions, but we're really educating ourselves throughout the relationships that we're building with our colleagues. So something that we've done time and time again over the last few years is storytelling, where our diverse colleagues are sharing not just their work experience, but maybe more importantly, their experiences growing up, their personal experiences. We just had one this morning with our Latinx colleagues, given that it is Hispanic Heritage Month. And just hearing directly from them what their backgrounds is, I think is such a powerful thing. And so if I go back to Upstanders, or this group that we formed at this point about 5 years ago, one of the two pillars of Upstanders, which is a group of allies, it's about today close to 300 partners and managing directors across the firm. And the two pillars are educating ourselves and engaging, taking action. And the education part, the most effective way for us to educate ourselves is to hear directly those stories, to invite our colleagues who are leading different employee resource groups, business networks, as we tend to call them within our firm, to share their experiences. And the second thing you asked about concrete, one of the initiatives that we've launched about a year ago is called Groundbreakers, and it's a program dedicated to training and sort of this further education that the dean was talking about once they're in the workplace.
Right. I think that's good because it talks about the dedication and the time and the commitment it takes to really build a space, right? You're not, we all want results today, right? But we are working in workplace cultures that have been the way they have been for some of our cases, 160 years. And the work of changing that culture into one that, was never designed for someone who looks like me and was crazy when people like me weren't even allowed through the door, and building into something that is truly inclusive takes everybody, and it takes a lot of different initiatives. And honestly, y'all, some of them aren't going to work and some of them are going to succeed, and we just got to keep going, because it's when we fall back and we stall and we stop that it doesn't, that's when we really start failing at what is right now a crisis situation.
What you and David said is I mean, it's just great when you talk about storytelling, when you talk about sharing with others what your experiences have been. It's just releasing, not only for the storyteller, but for those who can identify with the story. I love those stories that really come from both sides, especially the side of those who may not have behaved correctly or appropriately, and then they learn from that, and then they share that with others and say, I just didn't do the right thing, but I'm here to tell you that I've learned from that experience, and I've moved on, and I've really I'm a better person because of it. And those stories are really exhilarating and freeing to a lot of people.
Yes. I always say that when you are one of the things people always know is when you commit a microaggression, what do you do? And I have a whole bunch of things that you can do, but the number one thing I really want everyone to do is to share. Yes, I may have said that. You don't have to say what he said, but here's what you do instead, right? Because you show that journey and you show that path. David, did you want to add something?
You mentioned something that really resonates to me. We are all accountable
Right.
to in this journey, and this is something else that I realized a few years ago. We have our diversity committee. We have our amazing head of diversity, Shauna Ferguson. We have our CEO leadership team focused on DE&I. We have folks within our human resources. But even when you add all of those people, it's still a very, very small minority of any firm. And it really comes down to all of us taking accountability for moving this forward, for taking ownership of this journey. It's just, it's just like a firm trying to globalize. Like, it doesn't happen with just a CEO deciding that this is the right thing to do. Everyone has to be engaged in it, and this is absolutely no different.
It's part of our job. If you want to be part of this company, this is what we do, and this is who we are, and it is just as valuable as any business initiative that we put forward. And to your point, that is the job of the CEO right there, right? As whether it's the president of the university, whether it's the head of the company, you set the standard that yes, this is what we do here, and that way you can be the person when folks object. You're the one who they go to. They don't go to that colleague who's just really trying to do the work. They can go to, well, they can't go to the CEO, but they could and say, I object to this. Fine, you can figure that out, but that's part of what your job is. One of the things that David had mentioned, and something that is very near and dear to my heart, is sponsorship. Because I think that you can have role models, you can have mentors, but having someone say your name in rooms that you are not in, and speak up for you, and make sure that you getting the good work, and that feedback that you got is translated into effective work. That's the change that I think will actually shift forward the workplace. So I'm curious for both of you, because I think a lot of people who've succeeded in their careers, especially if you're a person of color, you've had a sponsor, someone who has done that role for you. If you've had that person, and either of you can share this, how did you find them, right? How did you find them? Because I know there's a lot of people listening who would love to know how they can find a sponsor. And then if you don't think you have found one, what advice would you have to folks who are trying to find someone who can, speak up their names in rooms that they're not in? Dean, if you'd like to start us off.
Yeah, sure. That's very important, because there is a difference between a sponsor and a mentor. The sponsor is going to really speak up for you on your behalf when you're not there, because a lot of decisions are made based upon the input of people. And some people, if number one, if they don't know you, they won't say anything positive about you. Number two, if they want their candidate, their person to get the position or to get the nod, then they're going to speak up for that person, and they may even say something negative about you that would give you a disadvantage. So the sponsor is there to say, no, I know this person. I know they can do the job. I know what they've done before, and I think that we ought to give this person a chance. And I've had many sponsors throughout my career, and oftentimes it is an introduction. It is a mentor who has introduced me to a sponsor, and that has been great. I can proudly say that Dr. Freeman Rabowski at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, who's been featured on many stations and newscasts and 60 Minutes. He is my sponsor. He is my mentor. If he says something positive about me to others, I'm going to either get the job, or I'll get the project, or something positive will happen. But he is a very powerful sponsor for me, and people will listen to him. So I can't emphasize that enough, that you really need a good sponsor. And if you find one, make sure that you treat them well, make sure that you stay in touch with them, and
true.
Make sure that you hold up your end of the bargain.
Yes. Yeah. Trying to ensure that, oh man, why can't I find a mentor and I want to share with them? Be like, you know what? You reach out to someone, and the only time you reach out to them is, how can you help me? They're probably not going to follow up with you. But if you continue to reach out to them and say, here is the value I can do, or what do you need, and then you continue that relationship, then they will see you not just as someone who they can just help out of the goodness of their heart, but also, because we are selfish creatures as human beings, someone who can also advance their career and their prospects and their standing in their companies. And so it's the balance of both of those that I think is really, really important when it comes to finding your sponsor.
And in the
David, how
age of
about you?
texting, it's
Oh,
very,
go ahead, Dean.
I was going to say, in the age of texting, it's very easy to update someone with a text. Hey, this is what I'm doing. Boom, and they get it, and they say, "Oh, I'm proud of you. Keep up the good work," and you just move on. But just those little messages will go a long way. So when you really need them, they're there for you.
They're there. There's my mom was cleaning out my house back in Trinidad, our home that we've had for like 110 years, and she found a picture of me. There was a picture from college, and they were doing this where did people go get their internships, and it was me when I was in Geneva, and I remember that because I had gotten that job in Geneva because I went to get ice cream at my dorm at Princeton, and I started talking to the man next to me, and he asked me what I did, and I was like, I'm a sophomore, and I've been trying to find a job in international work forever. And I asked him what he did, and he said he is the Deputy High Commissioner for the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. Changed my life. He had a friend who was in Jamaica, who was from Jamaica, who was running the Americas Bureau. She had rented out his apartment in Geneva. He connected us, and 20 years later, I finally reached out to him again and said thank you again. And he said he remembered me, and we had such a good email exchange. Please thank the mentors who got you where you were, because I remember the people, and I know they remember too. And it's just really, it's especially now, it's just so grateful to see it. So I agree with you 100%. But we are talking about sponsorship right now. And David, I'm gonna turn it over to you, because I know that that's not just something you do personally; it's something that you're really invested in the company itself at Wellington. So you want to share a little bit more about that?
Sure. And so if I go back to your question about how to identify a sponsor or a mentor, but then I also want to talk about establishing within a firm really a dedicated effort to it, because I think that's really what's important, because that certainly can make it a lot easier to identify that sponsor. But obviously finding something in common. And so, if I had been smart enough to go to Princeton and I was working with you, I'd be like, okay, Michelle, we both went to Princeton, and let's find something to connect. Well, that would be the one thing to connect on. And there can be so much.
I would have gotten into Princeton now. Trust me, it would never have happened. I interview a lot of kids now. It's not a chance. But thank you. Yes.
But I think that also, once you've established that connection, it is on the mentee, so to speak, to really work to deepen that relationship. It's up to the mentee to schedule the time, to develop the cadence, and then the mentor or the sponsor will be there without a doubt and give their full attention during the meeting. But it's really on the mentee to take the first step and to establish sort of logistics, in my opinion. From the sponsorship point of view, it is so critical, and it is for me so much more important than having a good mentor or having a good coach. Because especially, you said something earlier that's really important, which is when you look at most firms and their leaderships, they still look very much dominated by a certain demographic, by white males. And I think it's really important, if we want that change to happen, for that sponsorship to be established, especially because it's usually within these cohorts that decisions are made around promotion, advancement, around stretch opportunities. And so that's really where the sponsor can act as a champion for their colleagues. And so we established a dedicated role. And I'm going to go back to something that Dee Nelson said earlier, which is that you do need to look for an established group to form itself, to look after the next generation, to look after their diverse colleagues, to bring them up across the firm. And that role has to be played by all of the leaders across the organization. And you've obviously had a group that's very dedicated to the mission of DE&I, but on the other hand, you've had groups that have sort of stood in their way, and then you've had a very large group that doesn't know how to do anything. So training, if you want, the sponsors is also something that's really important to make sure that we're all on the same page about how we can be most effective.
Got it. I mean, that's really good. And training sponsors, I think one of the challenges that I often hear when it comes to as we launch sponsors is that sponsors just don't know what to do, right? So much of how we succeeded at work felt like it was informal. Some guy came and told us, hey, come with me, see how it's done. And we didn't realize that those were sponsorship relationships. So then when in turn we're asked to do that for someone else, that informality goes away, especially now when everything has gone on virtual. And now we need to be equipped in what to do, and having a way to equip people to say, this is how you address biases. This is how you can talk through differences. This is how you manage conflict. That kind of training is necessary instead of just throwing someone in and telling them to go ahead and get started.
I think
Ronald is not going to be able to join us, but Margaret is going to come back, and she is going to, it's like that secret Avenger who swoops in the middle of our panel. She's going to share some things with us. We'll keep talking, but a lot about what AIG is doing as well. Hey, Margaret.
Hey, Michelle, and great to be able to zoom in literally. I want to be able to offer Ronald's voice here because he has been a beacon. He has been a voice. He has been a storyteller, and he has been a catalyst for change in the insurance industry. And Ronald, with your leadership and the partnership that you show in the industry, we say thank you. I am not doing you justice, my friend, but I will say a big thank you to you and AIG because you truly collaborate and sit with us under our tent, making a difference and making that actionable impact. And I'm honored to be able to share that with our dive-in community, Michelle. So thank you. Thank you for that. The on-ramping, the STEM connection, lifting up, lifting as we climb, as my dear friend Grace Vandercruz, my mentor, and someone who's been an executive sponsor for me, she always says that, we lift as we climb.
Good. I think that is a worthy and something that we need to celebrate more. And that's it. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you for zooming in. My microphone's a little bit off, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it to David and Nadine to talk about allyship while I get this figured out. But I will say that the buzzword of 2020 was allyship. It was all about how to be an ally, how to be a better ally, how to be an effective ally. And allyship is something that genuinely matters. And performative allyship is something that we often do instead of the real work. So, Dean Nelson or David, whoever would like to start, I'd love to ask you, what is that real work when it comes to allyship? As a peer-to-peer, as an individual, what is it that we can do?
I'll let David go on first on this one.
Okay. Great, thank you. Well,
so I think that's fair.
I think, first and foremost, it's commitment. It's commitment to educating oneself and to learning and to building trust, and then it's committing to action. I think obviously it's been a very important year, and allyship has been so important. But I think what we do today and what we will be doing a year from now arguably is so much more important than what we were doing a year ago, because that's what's going to show whether we as individuals or we as firms are truly committed to change, to, as you called it earlier, Michelle, systemic change in our industry. And for me, allyship is about engaging others around us to join in the effort, to join in this grassroots effort. So no one can do it on their own. And And then allyship is also to really um, be willing to be bold and to be brave, to ask the difficult questions, to ask the uncomfortable questions, to to really go into topics that maybe we have been shying away for years and years, if not decades, and just remaining committed to having these difficult conversations.
Good. And that's the, the difficult conversations part. I know is hard for people, because it feels really uncomfortable. You're entering spaces where you're not comfortable. You're walking into rooms where you're not sure that you're welcome. People have told you to stop doing this, or and it's hard. But what I love to folks to remember is that change doesn't happen from spaces of comfort, right? Like that couch, right? You're lounging on the couch and you're really happy and you're really comfortable. And then someone says, get up and change the world. You're like, no, because I'm really comfortable. And the change that we do it's gotta start from that uncomfortable space. And I hope that as we do that work of allyship and as we remember that that work is centered on the people who are marginalized, who, I'm going to be honest, we feel uncomfortable every single day, not just pretending it doesn't exist, but really doing the work to navigate it. And that's, exactly what you said, man, trying to have that action and to create that sense of belonging so that your colleagues and your peers know that they belong here.
Yeah, that empathy
I
is so
totally agree. Go ahead, David.
No, please, Dean, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what you were saying, and it's using your power, your resources, your privilege, what your position to have an impact or make an impact on a group of individuals that otherwise would not have the opportunity to obtain half of what you have or a quarter of what you have or anything. So it is number one, a sort of a belief system. It is a way of existing. It is changing the way that you approach life. It's saying, hey, I can't just look out for me, myself, and I and my family. I have to look out for others, or I have to pay attention to others. And it doesn't stop with those who are at a certain level. It goes all the way down to those who may even be marginalized themselves. There's always someone that you can help. So, I look at what we are going through at North Carolina Central University. There's an industry and a group of individuals within an industry that are saying, look, we want to help disenfranchised individuals enter into this industry because we believe that we can make an impact on this particular disenfranchised community if we if we open the doors so that these diverse individuals can come in. And they have not only used their power and their influence, but they have used their money, their finances to really create an infrastructure whereby individuals can get the training that they need to enter into the industry and then be able to sustain themselves once they get into the industry and advance in the industry. So this group of individuals is bringing together other partners, as you mentioned, David, their network in order to make a huge impact on not only the industry by diversifying it, but also on a community. So, to me,
Yep.
I give them kudos.
Yep.
To really drive a lot of this work. And then finally, it's about accountability. We not only need to hold ourselves accountable, we need to hold those who are in a position to drive that change accountable.
Accountability. And one of the questions that I get often, and maybe Ronald, you can have some insight into that, is how can you do that accountability? How can we make sure beyond just, oh, well, I mean, there's always the bonuses and we can talk about that, but in your experience, what have you seen work when it comes to accountability?
Well, it's going to go back to that whole measurement. We're hearing it from regulators in our industry. How do you become more transparent around your data, around your representation? And so I'm proud that AIG, we've been transparent. We said we want you to see the numbers because we realize that we're on a journey and we have work to do. There are others that don't feel comfortable sharing those numbers. But part of being an ally is that you are acknowledging that there is an issue, there is a problem, and that we need to address. I'm going to also say that it needs to be embedded in goals. We do performance management. Our compensation needs to be tied to this in the same way it's tied to our risk management results.
Yes, tying it to, I always find it challenging when we say, here, you make the business case, make the business case. People are not widgets. We cannot just make them into numbers. But also, the business case doesn't just mean how does diversity drive profit. The business case means how does diversity fit into our strategy as an organization? And whatever we do, whether it's academia, whether it's corporate, how can we continue building on that? I'm going to let you respond in a second. I just want to point out, if anyone sees the Slido, please A, submit questions. We will get to them in about 6 or so minutes. And B, upvote questions, the ones that you really want answered. You can just click that thumbs up button. You can upvote questions and we'll make sure to answer them. David, the Dean, do you have any other thoughts about accountability or how you have seen it been working?
I'll just reinforce what Ronald just said, which is once you start showing the numbers, there's nothing more powerful to drive change and to get people motivated to change those numbers. If I think about the asset management industry, it has a terrible track record. I think only second worst to the construction industry in terms of gender balance or gender imbalance, for instance. So as soon as you start to show those numbers, we're all driven by wanting to improve them. And so that transparency is indeed extremely important. And that's something that we've done within our firm, is to be much more transparent. And that, first of all, helps us determine aspirations and goals, as Ronald just mentioned. And then on top of it, it gets the firm behind them, the collective firm, not just the leadership, behind changing those numbers.
Good.
Yeah, David, you hit on a key word there, and that's transparency. What we ask employers to do is to be transparent with us and let us know whether or not they have a psychologically safe environment for our students. And that is a huge selling point. If you can show that not only that you're measuring where you are, but that you have that intentionality that Ronald mentioned, then that bodes well for the company and bodes well for the students. And the students know, okay, this is an environment where I can go and, things may happen, but I know that just software, there's going to be someone there to fix it once it does go wrong. So nothing is going to be perfect, but at least they're making the right effort.
Exactly. And the effort and the rightness of it hit a turn during COVID, and the mental exhaustion a lot of us feel. And Ronald, this question is going to be for you. Go ahead. Yeah, I'll finish this question. I'll turn it back over to you because I know there's a tiny bit of a delay. The one thing that I have seen that has happened that's been really sad to see, but also expected, is the backlash, right? The backlash to diversity initiatives, the complaints about reverse discrimination. And so, Ronald, I'll pause and let you answer, because I would love to know what you've experienced, because there have been such gorgeous, great, glorious stories. And there have been ones that I find frustrating in the work that I do. And I know a lot of people are trying to figure out how to navigate this. So when it comes to, sharing with our majority colleagues, when they say things about how this is unfair and this is what discrimination is, when we try to do these diversity initiatives, what would your response be to something like that? And I'll pause because I know that there's a delay.
So one of the things that we have really tried to definitely encourage our courageous conversations. That means a one-on-one opportunity to hear about my experiences. And as we had individuals who said, I don't know what to say going into the conversation, I recommended that they go into to listen, to learn, to deepen their understanding around that individual's experience. I encourage them to use open-ended questions. And I also encourage them to avoid why, because why becomes judgmental. Like, why do you feel that you're not moving up at AIG? But what would that look like for you, Ronald? When do you think we can do something about this? How can we do something about that? That keeps that conversation going. And then I'm also asking you not only to ask me those types of questions to deepen your understanding, but what can I do to be a better ally? And I often will turn that question around. I'll say, what do you think you should be doing more of? Because some folks just need validation around what it is that they are doing. And then I'm going to also encourage the companies that are on the line. We captured the themes. What were we hearing in those conversations? And around the world, we heard about 16 different themes that were coming out. Some was new, but one of the things that we heard our employees say is, I want these conversations to continue. I have them with some of my good friends. I have them with some of my allies, but my manager now knows my experience. My manager's manager now knows my experience. And what we were hearing from some of those execs, I never knew you were experiencing that in the workplace. And your experience and my experience has really differed. And how can I change that because of the privilege that I have in the roles that I'm in?
I think that that's perfect. And I think that that's a really great summation of individual accountability. And instead of saying it's on someone else to solve it, it is also on us as individuals, because it's so easy to pass the buck on to somebody else and not to us. I'm going to go to David. From your experience, being in the work that you do right now, I mean, have you heard this kind of chatter, and what have you done to respond to that? And then Dean, I'll let you go, and then we'll turn over to questions.
Yes, we've heard it, and it's especially because we established this group of upstanders as a deliberate group of sponsors and allies to our underrepresented colleagues. And whenever I've heard maybe that complaint or that message, I tend to point those colleagues to what the firm has historically looked like and what it looks like today. So, to some extent, looking back at the numbers. And so if I just think about gender, about 80% of the firm's partners are male, 20% female. If I think about people of color, it's about 10%. And so there's still a very, very long way to go. And I think that, we're generally in industries where we're driven by numbers and quantitative measures. And these are just extremely powerful numbers that no one can refute. But it is very typical. Yeah. Mm-hmm. When there's a group that has experienced privilege over time and you take a little bit away, it feels like you're robbing them of everything, right? And so it is a natural tendency to sort of hold on to that. And I think that's where the conversation does need to happen. You shouldn't run away from the conversation, but really try to think through rationally what those, again, the numbers look like, which I think are just a broader reflection of reality.
And I think that that's, the numbers are not great. And the numbers are especially not great as you go up in the pipeline, as you go toward the leadership section. And at some point, we have to stop saying it's the pipeline, it's the pipeline, it's the pipeline. And we have to start saying it's the people, it's the systems, that's the change that has to happen. Dean, I'll let you take on that one, because I know that that's come up a lot in the academic setting, this question of, preferential treatment and having that seen to be unfair when it's really, in my opinion, it's leveling a playing field that has been unfair for generations. So what do you say, or what do you do in response?
Yeah, I first of all, I try to identify with those who feel threatened, and I don't blame them for feeling threatened. I might feel the same way if I were in a position of power and someone else is not, and then that other person was given more power, then feel a little threatened and a little jealous. And so I don't blame individuals for feeling that way, but I do blame them for behaving in a way that causes harm to those to others. So when you've been in a position of power for so long, you feel very uneasy when others get the chance to move up. And um, just very briefly, after the Civil War, when African Americans were allowed to gain some social, economic power, political power, there was a huge backlash. It was violent at times, and today it's not as overt or as violent, of course, but the feelings are still there. But there was never a complaint or much of a complaint when negative treatment was given out, when there was overt racism. It just wasn't there. But now to compensate for that negative treatment that has happened over the years, not only to African Americans, but to many disenfranchised groups, we're providing positive treatment to help heal a wound. And if you cut your right hand and you begin to bandage it, your left hand is not going to say, well, wait a minute, hold on. What are you doing to the right hand? No, it's to make us holistic, to make us effective. Then we must make sure that all parts of the body are able to function well. And you go into whether it's a business strategy or a talent management strategy or a moral strategy.
Or all of them,
I
right?
believe that all of those are true. Yeah, all of them. We need to make sure that the organization is functioning holistically and effectively, and that no one is not or no one is devalued. You don't want to devalue someone. You want to make sure that they are able to contribute to the value of the organization.
I think that's key. When I do my trainings and my speeches, one of the things I really want people to be taking away is you're a partner in this, right? This is not the work of guilt or shaming. It is the work of change. And change I can't change on my own. And there are people around you who you work with every single day who deal with these microaggressions, who deal with the racialized harassment. And if it's something that you didn't see before, okay, but it's something that you see now. And if we can demonstrate empathy toward each other and we can believe that someone else's life matters as well, I think that goes a long way to get into the work of change. So you are all amazing. Unfortunately, I think Ronald's internet has dropped again. So like I said, he's going to just come and do another session for us. We have so many questions from the audience. We have about 15 minutes or so to answer them. So what I would love to do is, go through some of these questions. I love that you all upvoted a lot of them. Thank you so much. I got to say the number one right now, and as someone who lives in a very small town in rural America, this has come up a lot, is about difficult conversations. And how do we balance having difficult conversations with topics that are human, but that can become politicized and religious-based? I think Ronald's back, but Dean, I think I'll start with you because I know that this has come up in college campuses often. Because you talked about empathy earlier, and I think a lot of it starts with that, but I'd love to hear more from what you have to say about how we can change that.
Yeah, well, I love the courageous conversations, the difficult conversations. We in academia we say if you can't find an argument, start one. So you want to really bring to light those issues that need to be discussed, to really get at the root causes and to it's not if you know everything about something, then there's really no need to discuss it. You just state it as fact and boom, it's done. But we're wrestling with some really tough issues, and they're very complex, a lot of moving parts. But one thing I would say is that when you're ready to have a courageous conversation or a difficult conversation, it doesn't mean that the other person is ready to have that conversation.
Good point.
So don't assume that you can just force the conversation and that others will participate. The other thing I would say is that you shouldn't um, ask questions as if that person is the ambassador for all those underrepresented individuals or marginalized people or individuals that they may represent. Um,
Yeah.
and you shouldn't ask them questions to tell you heal and what they're going through and all. You need to talk about what it is that you think is going on. But if someone is on the ground and someone has their foot on their neck, the worst thing you can do is just go and kneel down beside them and say, well, how does it feel to be down there? No, get this person's foot off of my neck. And then we can have a conversation about how I felt when I was down there. But first, you know, so do something, take some action, but don't just ask questions about how does it feel. So I would say those are two very important items when you get ready to have that conversation. But I do think that the conversations need to be had, and that the environment needs to be ripened for those conversations.
Mm-hmm. And managers, I think, also need to be trained to handle conflict, right? That if you're going to have these conversations at the workplace, do you as a manager, do you as a leader know what to do and what to say when they seem that they'd be going awry? And, we weren't trained to have difficult conversations at school, y'all. And right now we're having conversations over Twitter and Facebook posts, and those aren't real conversations, those are statements. So how can we really get to that point where that your perspective, which is something I may never agree with, and I may not agree with the values that you have, but I can respect you as a human being of equal dignity to my own. And I think we start there and then we go to the work of action, because that's the allyship there. Anyone else want to add anything to that?
I'm just going to simply add, if it's probably obvious, but if we let political correctness drive the conversations we're willing to have, it's just going to perpetuate the status quo.
I'll keep going, David. I think Ron is like about 10 seconds behind us. So just finish up and then I'll turn it over to Ronald.
That was my statement. I'll let Ron go.
So here's another question that's come up. How do team building exercises and regular meetings affect a sense of belonging for BIPOC colleagues? Are there pointers you would give to people managers? So anyone has any thoughts on, how can you continue to do those team building exercises and how can you do those meetings? From my perspective, like I said at the beginning, it's about trust, it's about empathy, it's about building that sense of belonging. But again, what pointers would you give to anyone managing people to how can you make sure that your BIPOC colleagues feel involved and included in that work? I'll turn it back over to you all.
One thought go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, I was going to say that in that safe environment is very important, because you want to make sure that you really are a team. I mean, before you build and strengthen the team, you got to make sure that you're really a team. Other people may say, I'm part of this group, but we're not a team. I don't feel as if I'm part of a team. So making sure that you have the right goals, you have the right objectives, making sure that you have a good sense of where everyone is on the team individually and then holistically, before you just say, okay, we're going to have a team building exercise. This is going to be great. I think you really need to survey everyone and get a sense of whether or not they feel as if they belong. And then you can set your goals and objectives and find out what issues there are and bring in the experts to make sure that those issues are addressed so that the team really can function better and address those issues. And then they start to build a more effective team, and they're able to get a lot more accomplished and feel as if they can go farther together.
Right. That is some fantastic advice, because so many of our companies rely on our teams and our groups and how we are going to be as teams, and allowing them that space to grow and to have that conflict and to really lean into those problem solving skills are going to be important. I think about, I'm looking at a couple of the questions, and I know we're getting toward the end. For example, this really great one that Dwight asked about, do you only need to bring diverse talent from HBCUs? And I will just say that HBCUs don't even contain nearly the high percentage of especially Black talent that exists at state universities, at community colleges, at universities that aren't necessarily nationally ranked. And yet so many of our organizations, of which we are a part, focus on that credentialing to the exclusion of a lot of super talented people who may have gone to schools that allow them to work their second jobs, that allow them to take care of their kids, that they were able to afford without going into massive debt. And again, as you are doing that interviewing and that hiring, how are you considering all of that as part of it? So that's a good one. And I will say, maybe as we do final words before we turn it over to the Justice Choir, I really like this question that Bill asked, which is, at what point do you decide that the effort to try to change an organization from within is not worth the harm it is doing to your career by staying there? And the reason I like that, and I think about Nicole Hannah-Jones, and I think about that letter that she wrote, which is, you can only stay for somewhere that is just going to be so hurtful and harmful to your mental health for so long. So I would love to ask you, as we wrap up, how do you do it? How do you keep going? There are people who tell you that the work that you're doing is ineffective, or the people who you think that you are helping who push back on you. And I'd love to know, get hopefully from all three of you, if Ronald's on, but maybe I'll start with the Dean and David. How do you do it? I'll
David,
start
I'll
with you,
let you
David.
go first on this one.
You mentioned something that I think is really important, which is mental wellness in this environment, especially given what we've experienced working from home over the last 18 months. We need to recognize that we often talk about talent, but talent is people, and people have lives that go far beyond their day jobs. So actually, when I think a lot about this question, it's about really asking our colleagues, "How are you?" Just that simple question. I think can go a really long way, especially now, and that just allows someone to really open up. So I'm thinking about this question more from the other side, as maybe a sponsor, as a leader within the firm. It's on us to really try to understand not just the effort that someone is doing day to day in their day job, but really, what is happening in their lives.
Thanks, David. Dean, what about you? Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, extremely important to really have those conversations, as David mentioned, with individuals to find out, number one, what are their goals? What's their vision? What do they want to see happen there? Are their visions aligned with your vision? Are their goals aligned with your goals? And then there's a matter of practice. Okay, there's the vision. Here's what we want. Here's what we'd love to see. Here's the destination where we would like to be in the next 5 years. But what are we doing in practice? And are those two aligned? And that's extremely important. And then, does that really fit in with what you would like to see happen? I can certainly forgive individuals for not doing the right thing, but there's a lot to be said for believing in the right thing, at least believing, because sometimes we all fail and we all get busy and we don't have a chance to put 100% of our effort behind a particular goal, but we do want it to happen. We do want to arrive at that destination. So if you remind me, then I'll be able to quickly adjust and start rowing in that direction again. But if you find that individuals are not rowing in the same direction that you feel the organization should go, or if they're rowing purposely in the opposite direction, then it's probably time to jump ship. But I think that individuals are to be commended for sticking it out and being persistent, that stick-to-itness, because life is a struggle. Things are not going to be easy. This space is not easy. If you're looking for easy, you need to stay out of the D and I space. That is not where things are easily defined. I think that there's a lot of role ambiguity in there, and if you're not comfortable with that ambiguity, then you need to find maybe another area to get into. But if that organization is wrestling with the issues, that's number one, a plus. And you need to stay in there and wrestle with that organization, in my opinion.
Right. And that, and I think, and hopefully, there's so many really great questions, so many really great conversation happening. Please continue asking those questions. My advice to anyone who is struggling with that, you are in an organization and you can decide whether you keep going or you stop. And you have the work to make sure that there are other people who are coming in who look like you and who don't look like you, who want to belong to. And if that is on you to do it, then please. And if that's not something that you feel like you can do right now, that is okay too. It does not have to be on you all the time. I really want to say thank you to our wonderful panelists. They are fantastic. They did such good work. We dealt with our technical snafus as best as we could. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. We have an amazing presentation coming from you right now. We are going to have the Justice Choir share with us some beautiful music. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this. It is an extraordinary group of folks here, and you are doing the work of change. So I'm going to turn it back over to Margaret. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, David and Dean and Ronald, for gifting us with such a powerful and honest conversation. And it's my honor to guide us into the capstone of this session and to warmly welcome to the Dive In family, Tesfa Wadima Ginu. Tesfa, you are a treasure. And your love of music is as big as your beautiful last name. You've been sharing joy and your vision for equity and justice through song for many years. Through a trifecta of teaching, conducting, and performing, you've found a way to transform students and audiences and to reach resolutions of peace, equality, respect, and belonging through music. It is my honor to bring you Tesfa. Let him tell you his story and experience belonging. Tesfa.
Hi, my name is Tesfa, and I'm the founder of the 2 Repair Project. This summer, I spent 60 days traveling around the country, interviewing Black stakeholders, asking what do we need to repair our communities. The stories I heard were inspiring. The stories I heard were also heartbreaking. But those stories must be told, and they need to be absorbed by everyone in this nation. If we are serious about rebuilding the beloved community, it's going to take all of us, y'all. This website, this initiative that's being dreamed up right now is to take that content and lift those voices, amplify those organizations who have been in the trenches, who have been in the communities doing the work for decades. A lot of these organizations and a lot of these stakeholders don't have the resources that they need to provide the things that they've been providing. The hope is that to go to 2repair.org one day, find out what organizations are in your community. You reach out directly to them. Maybe you make a donation, but hopefully it doesn't stop there. Hopefully you look to actually cultivate a long-lasting relationship with these organizations, and you use your opportunity and your platform to amplify their needs and their cause. So I can tell you, growing up in Memphis, Tennessee, I grew up in a very privileged household. I grew up in the hood, but my mom was a principal. I didn't want for anything. But I know that that experience was not the same for a lot of my family members. But I think about the song that I sang as a child, that chubby little boy sitting on the back pew in that Baptist church in Memphis, Tennessee, singing, "Lift Every Voice and Sing." But I can think about Reverend Ron going on that Hammond B3 on that intro, and I'm looking around the church and I see people standing to their feet, and I see the joy, I feel the joy from my church members singing the Negro National Anthem. James Weldon Johnson and John Rosamond Johnson wrote this timeless classic around the turn of the 20th century. And I could just imagine hundreds of school children during the premiere of this song in Jacksonville, Florida. The joy that they felt, the pride that they felt, the hope that they needed from singing this piece of music together. I ask that you stand just as I stood as a little kid in that Baptist church years ago. I ask that you stand and you respect these words, but you also internalize these words. Specifically, sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us, but also sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. I am hopeful, but I am not just stopping at hope. I am hoping that you are willing to act. I am hoping that we can all join in together and lift every voice so that we can truly make this union more perfect.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicings rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won.
You may be seated. Now that you've sung this timeless classic, I would love to share this interview I was able to collect in Washington, D.C. I want you to pay close attention to his words about the need for resources in his community.
Basically, I feel as though that our community, we just need more people that could like stick together and share and just have like patience with each other and just basically just show that understand that we are not born the way that we are, and that we gotta have patience and show other people. So if you have sources and you have other things, share it with our black people. Don't just keep it to yourself. Don't feel like, okay, I know this and that's on him, I'm gonna leave him over there. And I feel like us as like black people, we mind our own business too much, which is when we see other people that's like us and they going through things, we should share and help them. And just because like when you found out what you knew, you wasn't born and knew that. You had to find it yourself or someone told you. So you gotta share the knowledge with each other and bring the sources back to the community, because we bring the sources back to the community and we can uplift the community and build the community because we have the sources. So without the sources, we can't do much. So we got to get out of that selfish mind frame, and we got to get out of the mind frame that we thinking that we were born this way and not understanding that we are this way because of the community. We are a product of our environment.
Thank you for singing today, and I hope y'all are humming that song all day long. Remember, we're in this together until victory is won.
Thank you all so much for this. Thank you, Michelle and David and Dean and Ronald. And thank you to our wonderful producer. Keep enjoying the journey of Dive In.